We're doing very well on health care. We'll see what happens. But this is a great bill. There's a great plan, and this will be great health care. It's evolving.
So it's great. That was a hopeful President Trump yesterday with his eyes on another shot at health care reform, which his staff is hoping to jam through Congress next week in time to add it to his list of accomplishments for, as I was telling you off the top, those first 100 days. So what is the difference in this new version of Trump Care as we understand it? Well, our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman, he joins us with some of the answers. I know it's still in flux right now, but what does it look like, and how does it differ from the first one?
Very much in flux right now, and most of it is very similar to the previous AHCA. Again, it's so preliminary at this point that even House members don't know all the details for a bill that the White House is hoping for them to vote on as soon as 1 week from today. But here's what we do know. On Medicaid, no major changes from the last Republican proposal. Payments to states would still shift to block grants. Now, that change was the main driver that would have taken coverage away from 24 million people in the last version. So it's very likely this new proposal would boot a similar number of people from health insurance. One major change has reportedly been authored by New Jersey Congressman Tom MacArthur, a Republican from the Cherry Hill area. His tweak would end the Obamacare requirement that patients are charged the same for health care coverage regardless of their health status. Under this proposal, healthy people could be charged less, sicker people could be charged more, and his plan would add a high-risk pool for the sickest Americans, but their rates could and likely would still then shoot sky high. The other big change is on the most popular aspects of Obamacare and the plan that appears to keep them and get rid of them at the same time. The updated Republican plan would specifically retain the provision that allows kids to stay on their parents' plans through age 26. It would guarantee coverage of emergency services and maternity care, and it would continue to guarantee coverage for people with pre-existing conditions. But, and there is a big but at the bottom of the page. Why? Because this new plan also allows states to seek waivers for any or all of those popular protections if any of the three situations is in place. The changes would lower premiums, which they probably would, if the changes would increase the number of people that are covered, which is less likely, or, and this is my favorite, if the changes would advance, quote, the public interest of the state, which reads like a loophole big enough to drive tens of millions of people through. Best case scenario would be a patchwork of different healthcare regulations among different states. Final note, the numbers. As we mentioned, nothing is down on paper on this revived plan at this point, so we don't know the specifics. And that means neither does the Congressional Budget Office. And they won't know until the plan is in writing, which might not leave enough time to determine how much the plan would cost or how many people would lose coverage, especially with the White House pressing for speed on the issue with their eyes on the scorecards for Trump's first 100 days. Rich?
All right, Andrew, nice job. Thank you. Let's bring in our panel. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Scott Vanderhoef, former 5-term Republican Rockland County executive and co-chairman of the Palisades Institute of Dominican College, and the man trying to use his fingers to add, Andrew Whitman, who you met, our senior political correspondent. Okay.
I need the CBO.
Scott, last time around, beyond the moderates having real problems with it, it was the Freedom Caucus that wouldn't go along to get along. This time, it seems, maybe they're catering to them with all the loopholes that Andrew said, but if you're a moderate running for this, and we've had some in our region who got an earful in the town halls, this thing is politically dangerous to put your name on.
Yeah, it is, and that's one of the reasons why, with all those caveats, it's going to be very difficult still to get through, because remember, you're dealing with 2 or 3 sets of congressmen who have different views of this, some of which say you can't do anything unless you simply repeal Obamacare and don't add anything to it. They don't care about people falling off. One of the big issues, too, of this is, and it's really enormous because it sets the stage for other things, are the subsidies in this, insurance subsidies that go to Affordable Care Act. That deals with the budget, that deals with a whole series of things. Unless you understand that piece, it's really hard then to predict how this would play out in terms of how people will get covered, who's going to pay for it, how much it's going to cost ultimately. So there are enormous issues. Politically, it is, I think it's a minefield, and it still is. I am convinced the president has no clue as to what's in it or cares what's in it. He's just working on the 100-day thing, and that's a big mistake because people are going to run on this in 2018, and they could lose just on that basis.
And you know, Dominic, the one thing I think everybody starts to get a feeling of is, we all agreed, Obama did an awful job of communicating to the people what he spent all his political capital on. But somehow, some way now, people seem to say, I get it. You take this thing away, I'm going to be losing something. And the stories for guys like us and every TV station across this country will not be hard to tell. There are going to be a lot of people who want them to tell their stories, and people themselves are going to say, wait a minute, all of a sudden, my wife has had breast cancer, and it came back, and now she could treat it before, but she can't treat it now. And what happens to us? We're put in this high risk pool. We can't afford this. We're going to get a million of those stories that are out there. I think Republicans get that, at least some of them do, and say, I'm going to get killed on this in 2018.
No doubt about it, Richard. What you have just set up, what the county exec has just set up, is exactly what happened a short time ago for Republicans, and it's exactly what's right around the corner this time around. Why would you do this? It's clear that if you try to please those on the far right of the party, conservatives, the right, the Freedom Caucus, then the moderates are not going to be happy. If you try and please the moderates, the Freedom Caucus will storm out. Either way, President Trump loses. Look, if you don't believe what I'm saying right now, just look as you focused on this week, the special election in Georgia. With the Democrat, it's going to be a runoff, but where the Democrat did exceedingly well in a Republican stronghold, that is the tea leaves that is on the scene right now for Republicans. And they're going to end up going down the drain with President Trump.
And the problems, and we'll talk about it in the next segment, Andrew, a little bit about what's looming a week from today with a possible shutdown. But Trump, as much as he says it's his crazy standard 100 days, hopefully I articulated how he made it a point to judge him on those first 100 days and what he's done or not done. If he doesn't get health care reform done and find savings for that, he can't build the roads and bridges with his infrastructure plan, and he can't get his tax reform plan through. There's a domino effect here. He needs this math to work. I just don't know how he can thread this needle. And there's no way, with how he's run a scorched earth policy for the last 90 plus days, that Democrats are going to do him any favors. I just don't know how you can do this.
Well, particularly on healthcare, no Democrat will get involved in it. It will only be with Republicans. And so I think he's thinking that he can maybe get a few votes from the Freedom Caucus and still hold some of the more moderate Republicans because he's giving a little bit more to both sides.
That's just the House, by the way.
No, it is. Yeah, absolutely right. It is just the House. The other thing is, he then, I think, thinks that he can blunt the potential impact that these cuts would have on people's insurance by being able to say, well, it's really a state thing now. You wanted to stay on parents' plans until you were 26, and you wanted these other things that everybody likes. But, it becomes a state issue, as it should be, which is a very popular Republican mantra. And he thinks, my guess is the thought is that they can get some more votes in the House that way, by making it more of a state's issue, which is sort of an overreaching conservative principle. As for the particulars, if this thing actually gets through and winds up in place, people aren't going to care that it's a states' right issue or that it's a state-by-state thing. They're just going to know that they're not getting the same coverage.
But Scott, to me the thing is, I don't care if it's local government, county government, state, or federal. Every politician knows you don't make promises if you can't deliver on them, and you don't do it twice. So for me, I have always thought if a guy's going to get out that in front, he's already done the whip count, all right? He already done the head count. He knows he's got the votes. We learned the last time this is the game that can't shoot straight. He and Ryan aren't necessarily on the same page. I think it's politically really dangerous for him to say, because he's all under the gun and he wants to have some wins, you can't just say you propose it. You have to get it passed now. This is a second bite of the apple. And if he gets shut down a second time on this, only 100 days into his administration, he's lost the fear factor, and people are going to start looking out for themselves because next November, quickly coming around in the calendar. I think this is fraught with peril.
Well, it is, and we haven't even talked about the Senate. I mean, we haven't talked about whether it could actually get through the Senate and become law. And to Andrew's earlier point, what you may end up with are different state plans, not a national system at all, but different state plans based on fiduciary and financial issues. But the political side of this is, I don't see wins here, because how are the Republicans going to support this when they have all these other issues? And if it's not going to win in the Senate, they're going to be attacked for two things. One, having passed something that didn't work and ultimately failed. And they're going to be attacked because they didn't pass anything of all consequence.
But I also think the biggest political concern for the White House should be, and we've already seen this in polling, the Trump administration owns health care, regardless of what form or format that takes. If it's Obamacare and its successor failure of Obamacare.
Point, because the whole premise that Trump really wanted to try and convince his party is, guys, this thing's going to have major problems come next year. Just let this thing die on the vine here, and then we'll come in to rescue it. They didn't go along to get along. Now he owns it, and the polls have confirmed it.
Yeah, we've seen that polling from the Kaiser Family Foundation, which is the best healthcare-related polling group that's out there, that regardless of whether it's Trump care, Ryan care, or Obamacare, and whether Obamacare is working or whether with the subsidies you were talking about before, they sort of undermine the ability of Obamacare to operate, the public, by a large majority, already says this is Trump's. You own it no matter what the outcome of it is. So they may be well served to try to take a fix to Obamacare and improve it as opposed to actually tearing the whole thing down.
And one of the interesting things about this is the Obamacare issue. Insurers are trying to figure out how much to charge because the place is a mess. So they're trying to figure out what they're going to be charging, and they're waiting for Congress to do something. If they don't do anything, we're back to Obamacare, you're talking about potentially a 30% increase in some premiums across the board.
Oh, and I'll tell you, I have relatives involved in the hospital industry. There's complete confusion about what comes next. How do they make fiscal annual budgetary plans? What is going to be there, what won't be there? If you're in one state, you think maybe in New York, Albany will cover some of it. You go to Mississippi, you really think the state government in Jackson's going to really do it? Of course not.
But look at the impact of that uncertainty, because now insurers, as you were pointing out, aren't sure whether they want to be involved in the public exchange, whether they want to extend to other states. So you're going to wind up with coverage that's drying up in parts of the country. And it's not just because there's something wrong with Obamacare, it's because of the uncertainty that's been injected into all of healthcare because of the Trump administration.
It sounds like a stupid question, Dominic, but at the end of the day, would Trump be better off losing and not getting something passed resembling anything Andrew described? Or politically, that's too big a hit, even if the legislation's terrible. Does he win by losing here, or does he lose actually by winning?
On health care, he's not going to win no matter how you look at this. So I agree with your premise that he would perhaps win by losing. But what I don't understand, and I know, Richard, you've done segments on this about the math, and he needs the money from health care to move on to tax cuts and so on. Leave this hot potato, political potato alone. He cannot win. No matter what he does, he cannot. He's not going to rally Republicans. All he's going to do is expose that he doesn't have the political power that he within his own party that he pretends to have. And oh, by the way, if you can't rally your own troops, why in the hell would Democrats work with you?
And by the way, he could have played this. Not that it would have helped the country out, but he could have played this if this was Ryan's baby. He could have let Ryan own this thing from the beginning, and then Ryan couldn't even whip up his own party in the House to get the votes. And then Trump could have said at the end of the day, all right, we tried it your way, we're going on to other issues. But he feels compelled because they're telling him we're not doing X, Y, and Z till we get this thing done. In effect, he got bullied on this one. He did not want to do health care first, and I don't think he wanted to do it this way, but they made it clear, we're not getting to your infrastructure, we're not getting to your tax reform till you get this thing done, even though nobody's got a plan that can get the votes.
Well, there's a reason for that, and it's the Freedom Caucus again, because if we're going to spend on infrastructure and if we're going to spend on the massive tax cuts that Trump is promising he's going to lay out to us next Wednesday, the Freedom Caucus will not sign off on a huge increase to the deficit. It's like their core principle that guides everything that they do. So without the savings that they get from adjusting healthcare reform, to do both of those, infrastructure and the other, it would cost so much an increase in deficit spending that I don't think he could get the House Freedom Caucus to go along with it. And then he's got the same problem he's got on healthcare.
Okay, and all of this isn't just some arbitrary 100-day count. This comes as a week from today, we could be having a whole nother conversation. Believe it or not, we could be headed for yet another government shutdown. We're going to show you who would be the winners and the losers, and trust me, there'd be a whole lot more folks with L's here if in fact that happens.